Hey friends, I'd like to have a chat about what makes good or bad gameplay modifiers. And I'd like to do that in the context of scrolls in Gunfire Reborn. So first let's talk about what a scroll is. A scroll is an item that can change the game in numerous ways when it's picked up. These effects can range anywhere from getting more ammo, upgrading your character, or even forking projectiles. And that's what they do. They modify the game and how you play it. These types of modifiers are common in roguelikes, where you'll be replaying the same content over and over again, in order to keep each run unique, interesting, and refreshing. So, do scrolls suck? Hell no. They're the glue that holds the game together, and makes it worth playing. But not all scrolls are cut from the same cloth, and that's what we're here to talk about. What makes a good modifier, and what doesn't. So let's dive into it. When I think of modifiers, they immediately fall into two categories for me. The first of those groups is underwhelming filler modifiers. What does filler look like? It usually comes in the form of base stats, something like plus 25% rate of fire. It's usually a bonus that helps a bit, but will never really break the game in half, or change your playstyle. What else can fit in here? Other bonuses that usually come in the form of a percentage. 50% more money dropped, 50% less damage from traps. These are nice to have, and they might even make a run a lot easier. But you'll still be doing the same thing fundamentally. Okay, so what about 50% more damage? Well sure, it might make you overpowered for the run, but you'll still approach combat in the same way, and I think we can do better. And so we get into weirder ones. What about a scroll that heals you for 2 health per second? Well, it instantly changes how you approach gameplay, so it's already a bit better. You'll no longer care about taking chip damage, but now whenever you're in danger, you'll just sit behind a rock for as long as possible. Is that the gameplay that's the most fun? Probably not. Are you going to wait for 30 seconds after each and every room to fully heal? Yeah, of course you are, because you're a degenerate who will optimize the fun out of a game. Or at least I would. I would toss these types of modifiers into an unfun bucket. The types of modifiers that encourage boring or slow gameplay without adding anything interesting to counteract it. What about having a random chance to get money from breaking decorations? It's super fun to shoot an urn and have it explode into a coin bukkake. I mean, that's literally a loot box. But what does this encourage? Sitting back after each and every room to find and destroy every single decorator? Systematically? That's a fast way to add 10 minutes of nothing to a run. Okay, so we don't want to encourage boring or slow gameplay. So what does a good scroll look like? How can we fundamentally change the gameplay for the better? Well, let's try cutting out the battlefield. What if the first bullet you shoot in every room draws a wall across the map that inflicts dots and breaks line of sight? Well, now we can bait enemies back and forth across that wall for supplemental damage. We can use that wall to break line of sight, so we can section off the enemies and deal with them in manageable groups. Good modifiers usually change the game orthogonally. What if projectiles chain to the next enemy within 30 degrees? Well, now we're running around the battlefield trying to manipulate enemies into a conga line for maximum damage. It's just something that changes how you would approach an encounter. So, are these too much work to implement? Well, what's easier but still effective? What if every bullet now deals a flat 10 extra damage per hit? This sounds boring as hell, but it'll probably warp what guns the player wants to find. Time for a bullet hose that shoots 60 times a second, or a shotgun that spits out 30 pellets in a point-blank burst. Now a sniper rifle with an extra 10 damage doesn't look so hot. It's easy to implement, and at least it influences what weapons the player wants to find. Is that still too boring? What if after you kill an enemy you're invincible for 1 second, but you take 1000% more damage at all times? Well, now you're just gonna die unless you get into the thick of the fight, and kill enemies as fast and intensely as possible. No more sitting back and blinking away. Do those not provoke enough thought? And you're all about tactics? Well, let's bring back destroying decorators. When you destroy a decorator, you now regenerate 10 shield and or armor. But your shields no longer regenerate automatically. Now every fight is a dance of killing an enemy, and then trying to ignore the enemies around you as you find and shoot decorators to regenerate. The entire map is now a resource to manage. Do you clear out an entire area to fully regen? Do you leave a few urns in each location so you can circle strafe around the battlefield, dodging projectiles, and regenerating in every area as you pass? Will this still trigger boring degenerate searching? Yeah. But at least it turns the environment into a resource to manage. Is it going to be broken as hell? Yeah, probably. But it can be tuned down, and because it's fundamentally different, it changes how you approach a fight, and it'll still be interesting. Now, I know that we've been talking about scrolls and modifiers, but I just want to say that they can come in all shapes and sizes. The best games have modifiers layering on top of modifiers. In Hades, you have all the boons from the gods that can give additional effects. And what do those layer on top of? Your weapons, of course. And each weapon promotes its own playstyle in its own way. There are layers and layers of fun. In bullets per minute, each character themselves is a modifier for the entire run. I think my favorite example is Skuld. He loses 1 health every second, but regenerates 5 when he shoots an enemy. It twists the entire game into a mad dash where you ignore basically everything other than the enemies, since you rapidly die. Gunfire Reborn handles characters in much the same way, and it massively adds to the longevity of the game, and the interactions that can be discovered. Basically, I'm saying that if you try hard enough, you can jam pretty much anything into the modifier definition, so don't think too hard about it. So let's wrap it up. Modifiers are what hold roguelikes together. If you have good ones, you don't really need much else. I mean, how else can you put hundreds of hours into a game with no storyline or meaningful progression? They can make up for a lot of shortcomings, because gameplay is king. When they're at their best, they warp the game around them. And when they're at their worst, they do nothing interesting or actively hurt the game. Ideally, each one is a brush that paints each gameplay session in its own shade, and it only gets more interesting if they can all layer on top of and interact with each other. If you're going to make a game like this, maybe ask what type of modifiers make sense for you. Because all my modifiers come in the form of shielding. Join me on twitch.tv/FattRoss, Thursdays and Saturdays. Later.